Hello, my name is Aaron Cavanagh and I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Post-Burnout.com. Post-Burnout.com is a culture website dedicated to venerating burnt-out artists the world over. This is our website's podcast where we publish full-length recordings of our interviews, which are sometimes the unedited versions of our site's articles and at other times are exclusives. If you're a returning listener, thank you for coming back, and if this is your first time listening, thank you for checking us out. We hope you enjoy and consider subscribing, giving the episodes a thumbs up if you're on YouTube, or giving it a rating if you're anywhere else. It really helps us out. Thank you. Alright, in this edition of PostBurnout.com interviews, we speak with the American multimedia artist Eugene S. Robinson and the Swiss multi-instrumentalist and producer Manuel Liebeskind of the experimental electronic project Mangene. The two discuss forming the project, the recently released debut EP 101 Atomic Terms and what they mean, how this project differs from everything else they put out, the state of culture in the music industry today, Eugene's move to Spain, how Eugene's distinctive vocals fit this new sound, literature, and potentially returning to Ireland to take up an offer to fight.
Hello, good evening.
Hey man, how's it going? How are you?
Thanks. I'm pretty tired, but fine. How are you?
Same. Tired too, but I'll try not to take you too long.
That's fine. We have to take the time that we need. It's fine with me.
That's perfect. I'm not sure if Eugene, if the time got messed up for him, so I don't have a direct contact for him, just so they know this time. Is there any way you could message him or
Yeah, yeah, I
that,
can.
that'd be
I
perfect.
think he should have figured it out by now.
No, it
Um,
was just kind of an issue with the schedule on my part. I got the thing screwed up, and I'm really sorry about that.
yeah, I just drop him a message if you have a second. I just
Of course, yeah.
see. He has, I guess you saw that too. He has the kids, so
Yep.
this might
So no swearing on my
is a
part.
little
That's
bit,
fine.
yeah,
It'll be a
yeah,
clean interview.
fine. So let's see. No, there we go.
Where are you calling in from?
I'm in Berlin right now.
Okay, cool.
I'm actually Swiss, so I'll be in Switzerland next week. Uh, that's also why we have a Swiss label, but I live in Berlin since 30 years now. So
Okay, cool. So, how long have you been doing the solo project for? Because I guess we're going to get into it, but like, how long have you been kind of doing, I guess, the sort of electronic music that you're kind of known for, I guess?
yeah, kind of known for is maybe taken a little bit too high. I'm not really known for it, but yeah, I've been doing this since maybe I was 19 when I started making music, really.
What was it about kind of electronic music that kind of spoke to you, I guess, because my understanding too is that you also have background, I guess, in more traditional quote unquote music. So like particularly with kind of electronic music, what was it that kind of attracted you, I guess?
Um, it's really how I started to learn an instrument in a way or make music. I mean, I got a background from my parents, which is more in classical music, but I never actually learned an instrument. I kind of refused to do that as a kid,
Yeah.
although I obviously had a musical talent. I mean, I started very young to just drum on everything, and it seemed obvious that I had a rhythmical talent. I got a darbuka at the age of 3 from a musician friend of my parents, and actually it's a relative even, I think, who was an opera singer. And I was drumming all the time, but I refused to learn an instrument. So at maybe 19, maybe 18, I'm not really sure, I started to play on my mom's piano, and I used my dad had a reel-to-reel machine, and I
Mhm.
started to use this as an echo machine. You know, it had two speeds, so you could have two delays,
Yeah.
switch it. So that's kind of how I started, and I was asked from some friends who used to be in punk bands if I want to join a band, and just started playing keyboards and later guitar as
Yeah.
well. So that's how it happened.
I love that idea of not playing an instrument as a form of rebellion.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Did you when you kind of got into kind of experimenting with machines, did you find it enthralling? Were you like really interested in it, or was it kind of like a bit of a headache, but just something that you kind of wanted to do?
No, I thought it was really interesting. I mean, I was interested in this technology stuff, and it was a dream to have, one of these machines. They were very expensive at the time, and so I didn't really have the money. And I saved the money to buy my first synthesizer and stuff. So I had to at first borrow stuff with this first band I played in. I One of the members had a synthesizer at home, and so I could use this one. And that was really pretty cool. It took some time to understand what it actually is. I mean, at the beginning, if you remember, I got this Jupiter 4 Roland machine, which I still have, which I got from this guy finally.
Yeah.
And it had these presets. It was one of the first synthesizers that had presets. And of course, this was like a trumpet, and it was mimicking some real instruments. And at the time, I found, yeah, that's what they're for. And
Yeah.
then, of course, later I started to experiment. I thought, well, there's all kind of cool sounds, and
Yeah.
kind of came back to that piano playing. I mean, I love the piano, but it's started to be really interesting when I used this delay and from this reel to reel and kind of play with that and make sounds.
Yeah.
That
No,
was
and
more
and
interesting then.
do you find like, obviously as technology advances, that you try to keep up with things, or are you kind of happy with with the instruments and with the machines that you're kind of like familiar with? Like, how much of it is kind of like trying to be, I guess, on the cutting edge of what's coming out, and how much of it is kind of like sticking with the familiar, what you kind of know?
No, I'm totally interested in what's going on and new stuff. It's not so much new stuff actually happening. I mean, what's happening is really that everything can be kind of deconstructed and reconstructed. Um, so just got from Eugene. Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, so it's a totally open space. I mean, at the time it was like you could experiment and really move into new spaces, but with a very limited set of technology. Versus
Yeah.
now, it's more of like you can do anything, and there's like thousands of like plugins who try to give you help with presets and stuff, which doesn't interest me at all. So
Yeah.
it's really exploring things by myself, which is much more exciting.
No, I think it's really interesting because like obviously do you find that you have like a distinctive sound that's really yours because like I think I think that's like just like really critical in terms of like just finding your own tone, your own sound, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm.
Hey Eugene, I hope you don't mind we started without you.
No, no, that's fine. I had on my calendar 3:45, so that
Sorry, it
time.
was my fault, man. I was screwing up all the things. I really do apologize for all of that. So
Yeah, yeah, no problem. We're here, so we made it. Cool.
that's perfect, man. Where are you calling in from?
Northern California. Where are you?
I'm in Dublin.
Oh, Dublin. Jesus.
Nice. We've been there before,
Yeah,
remember?
at Wayland's.
Oh yeah, Wheelings. Yeah, yeah, I love that place. It's really cool.
Oh, right now there are a bunch of Irish people who want to beat me up there, so I'm looking forward to getting back to Ireland. So the guys over at Straight Blast Gym have invited
Mm.
me over for an ass kicking. I'm talking to this guy. Be quiet. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I said, I believe if you think you can solve your problems by beating me up, I'm willing to let you try.
That's a very friendly invite.
I'm a friendly guy, so I think it'll work well for everybody. So
Well, we're talking a little bit about this new project you guys got going on. I mean, like, one thing that I think is very interesting about it, we're talking kind of about the sort of advances in technology in terms of being able to, to kind of expand your sound or your sonic palette or however you want to put it. But at the same time, I think like projects like this, where people are kind of like in different corners of the world, can only really exist and be kind of ongoing like this within, I think, the realm of our new kind of current day technology, kind of as we're doing now. How do you find the kind of advances in technology have kind of helped what you're doing in this project?
well, I'm right here in Silicon Valley. So I take a dimmer view of technological advances. But the reality of it is, for the past at least 20 years, all of my friends who are in larger bands and larger musical concerns have lived in other places from, this it's a very kind of college age idea that, like the Little Rascals or the Honeycomb Hideout, that we would all live in the same house in the same place. But um, I know people who have done quite well being far away from the people they make music with. In fact, they probably do better. But there is a truism, and the truism is that, when we first started putting tours together decades ago, we were doing it by fax and by letter and occasional phone call, and that was totally miserable. So this does make things easier in terms of what happens to the sound. I think sound is an emotional factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you change much by, I don't think much changes
Yeah, I
because
mean,
whether you use a hammer or a screwdriver or a nail or CAD design, I don't think much changes in terms of how you capture emotion and some lyrical truth. So
what changes is the democratization of making the process. Being creative is not really the thing that's getting easier. I mean, the technology makes things easier for everybody and mostly cheaper. That's really nice, but at the other hand, it's easy to get distracted, and it doesn't really make a difference in the creative quality of what you have. So this is just, I mean, this definitely stayed the same. I mean, if you go back to Beethoven with his being deaf and still being able to write great music without even hearing it, I guess that's the approach of a creative process, which is kind of technology independent. And the technology, of course, gives you the ability to choose from a much larger palette of sounds and of stuff you can do. But in the end, it has to have this emotional impact that makes you listen to music. That's the most important thing.
right. Yeah, I guess you couldn't be any further away from sound than Beethoven was when he was deaf. That's pretty far away from sound. So yeah, this is not Berlin to East Palo Alto is not that tough.
Yeah. Well, actually, an interesting word you used there was democratic. I mean, it's making the process more democratic, you said. And I think, do you think now kind of, as everyone kind of has the sort of technology to be able to do things DIY, everyone's kind of eschewing the labels a little bit, which seems to be good. I mean, even people who are on labels now seem to be doing licensing deals rather than giving full their music basically to a company. Do you find that technology has made the process more democratic, or do you think it's making things more oversaturated?
Well, okay. In terms of problems, I can tell you right away that the number one problem is that labels with a completely straight face will give you $5,000 and expect in return a full length record.
Hmm.
Okay, that's a problem. I don't think. Yeah, on a laptop, I could probably record a record for you for $5,000. But will it be the record of my dreams, or will it be a random collection of noises? I don't know. Clearly, we're in positions where we have to find out because that's what labels are offering. And labels are offering that because they can't realistically sell more than that given the scenario. So, okay, so we're not going to go deep. The question is wide worth it? The fact that somebody in Sri Lanka, as one person once did, who was a DJ there, could lock himself in the studio and play one of our songs until the police came and got him, which actually happened, is great. But it makes for a good story. It doesn't make for rent
Yeah,
or
sure.
or dinner. It doesn't make it. So uh, democracy is great, but it's not so great if you can't eat. So it's a mixed bag.
Yeah. Well, I think that's like it's a really interesting perspective that I'm trying to like get into now. Is sort of it's something I've been thinking about too. Is kind of DIY in the digital age because kind of like when you think about like when now there's kind of like in lieu of the kind of major labels now. I mean, we're seeing a lot more kind of collectives and things like that. But I wonder if it's a bit ephemeral or if it will kind of have lasting power. I hope the latter. I mean, I think it's great that people are kind of coming together and trying to create a network. But I hope I hope it will last, I guess.
Well, I mean, there are a couple of different things, right? Like, I mean, for example, generationally speaking, one of my kids is 22, and I can't. I mean, she knows what an album is, but she's a big music fan, but she doesn't listen to albums, right? You have to be over 30 to say, I'm going to get a singular album from a single band and sit down and listen to it from beginning to end. It just doesn't happen anymore. So realistically, if a label gives $5,000 and I could generate 2 songs for $5,000, probably healthily, and they could put that on a compilation with some of their other artists who also do 2 songs that ends up on somebody's shuffle on their phone and gets heard, and maybe it guarantees that I can play a show somewhere. I guess that's success. I mean, certainly it's better than nothing, but we're pretty close to nothing. So, your ultimate objective in the end has to be to make something that has any lasting impact for you. And that in this instance, us. And I mean, nothing has had greater lasting impact on us than Mangene, because of the fact that we've been working on it for so long. It's like having a third appendage, or fourth in our case. So.
Right, and in the end, you notice that you made like 8 minute long songs. Nobody's going to listen to 8 minute long songs anymore. But as long as I enjoy that, there's an actual quality in the 8 minutes, and I really want to reach those people who would actually listen the 8 minutes. I mean, that's the problem we get with globalization and the access we have here, which is great. We can talk because we cannot just quickly come to Dublin to discuss these things. So this is great, but on the other hand, you have the whole world in front of you, and you have so much choice that nobody puts the attention in our 8 minute songs anymore. So what I really want, sure, is to find those few hundred people who are actually willing and enjoying this. And of course, that hasn't gotten easier to find those people. I mean, versus before, you would walk into the 2 clubs you had in your little town, and you would know that half of it is great bands that play there because the guy who was promoting the shows had a great taste in music and wouldn't care if there would be 20 people or 500. So you would find a scene, people who have a similar taste and would enjoy this because the choice wasn't that big. So while I think I don't want to complain about that, it's great to have a big choice. But what's happening in parts, at least, is that with all these choices, you're not listening to anything anymore. I mean, if you go 10 seconds by 10 seconds, you probably don't enjoy this anymore. Like, I mean, I'm using Instagram, and it's great to see what all these people are doing, but most of it, I don't even recognize what they're talking about because it's too fast.
Yeah,
that's a
There's
good
these
point.
2 sides of it.
No, I think we're still kind of beholden to big companies, but just maybe in a different way. Because like I think every artist now wears like so many hats. Like everyone has to be like a PR manager. Everyone has to do social media management and all these like things. And
No.
yes,
Awesome. Look, I started running a record label in 1982, and over the years, people have said to me, "You've done it before. You could do it again." And I realized, seeing how much work that Marlon from A Tree in the Fields has done on this Mangene record, and how much work has happened on the Buñuel record. And I have to honestly admit, I'm a pretty bright guy, couldn't do it. Not with the staff I had before, which is fundamentally me. Could not do it. Impossible. To track radio, press, retail, digital, it's like you could sell to the Tidal or Apple Music or Spotify, but the only reason those people pay out anything is because they're afraid they won't get your other releases, right? We don't, if you're a one-off or a small label, you do not have the heft or the weight to get them to treat you right. You're just making music for free. It's an impossibility.
I'm wondering also about your kind of view now on kind of the live music industry because I think DIY touring in a lot of ways is still kind of like persisted. People still kind of just putting on shows for the love of music, even though like you're saying, I mean, it is kind of like the kind of the accounts don't really balance. I guess the balance sheets aren't like you're definitely losing money. But I was wondering now I mean we're seeing things like kind of the explosion of something like a Live Nation or something like that that's become this really kind of global thing. And I've heard, like, for example, in Asian markets that typically didn't have a lot of acts touring, places like Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, they're getting a lot of acts that otherwise wouldn't come over because, there's a security, I guess, in kind of using a familiar brand that people are aware of. But at the same time, people are also saying that a lot of these big industries are actually kind of killing live music. It's actually making things kind of almost prohibitively expensive. People just can't afford
Yep.
shows that they otherwise could have. For you guys, I mean, has live touring the way you guys have always done it? I mean, has it changed much?
Well, if I can tell you, having toured on both sides of the Atlantic, that for the first time ever, the fees in America are greater than the fees of Europe. And I asked about this. I had some friends who used to work at Virgin there in London, and their take is that Brexit really screwed up the UK in
Yeah.
terms of music making. The clubs are having a harder time than ever, and people are choosing to skip the UK rather than go through the rigmarole of getting in and then getting out to another country. It's miserable. It's not healthy or helpful. And playing live, there's a great festival circuit, but everybody has glommed onto the live experience because you can't steal it, or they haven't figured out a way to effectively steal it. So Live Nation has got their hands in your pocket. Ticketmasters your hands in your pocket. And we played a show. Another group I was in played a show with Mr. Bungle this summer in Italy, and we couldn't sell merchandise because the venue wanted 25%, and the people selling the shirts wanted 25 or 30%. So it made no sense for us to walk away with 45% of things that we paid. We're going to subsidize those guys. It doesn't make any sense. And jumping in a car, I've got some friends who've done that. They've jumped in a car, put in their guitars. The guy plays like a line 6 or whatever it is that allows your guitar to emulate all these other instruments. And he just drives to clubs and says, "Hey, can we play?" So essentially, he's a coffee bar singer player in coffee bars where people have no interest in him. And he figures, I'm getting no money anyway, so why don't I play to the same 3 people without having to go through a booking agent? But that seems incredibly dispiriting to me. And he tried to give me a speech about that you don't understand the true spirit of rock and roll. I said, I do. My old guitar player used to play with Chuck Berry, and Chuck Berry would be appalled. He goes, I'm not going on stage unless there's cash in my hand, and I've got a gun to prove it. So nobody, yeah, those guys, they made it for as long as they did for a reason. So, it's nice to say, yeah, we're going to get in the van and go places, but, you know, we like our homes. We got good homes. We go 6,000 miles to play to 3 people. Nah, that's not going to happen. So, ultimately, I feel, despite Albini saying differently, I feel it's a greater loss than it is a gain. Right?
Yeah. No, I think I don't know. I think it's really just an interesting thing, but it seems like again a lot, it is just kind of I don't know. It seems to be a thing that whatever way you're kind of like as a musician, it seems like so negligible in terms of kind of making a living that it is something that's it seems just it's something that you have to do just for the love of it, I guess. And from your perspectives, I mean, what
You're
kind of
not
like
you're not
Yeah.
talking to anybody on this call that makes their living from music.
oh, me too.
I
I
mean,
make lunch maybe.
the point is, even if you do it just for the love of it, you're still spending so much money on doing it
Yeah,
that has to come from somewhere. I
Yeah.
yeah.
mean, so you should at least be able to somehow cover your costs. I mean, that would be not a very high expectation to
No,
be
no.
able to buy an instrument or something,
Well, I
you
kind
know.
of look at it like some guys like to golf. Some guys like to play tennis, and they spend a lot of money golfing and playing tennis, and it accrues them to them nothing outside of sheer enjoyment And I think that's kind of where we are with music. So
Well, when it comes
Yeah.
to for you, Eugene, when it comes to like kind of creating new projects and starting new offshoots, I mean, I think what's really interesting when I listen to your different projects is that how your vocals kind of complement each different style. And when I was really listening to I was really kind of listening to that aspect of each of your bands, and it's kind of interesting. I mean, like because it doesn't seem between Oxbow and between this and I like your other projects too. I mean, it doesn't seem like you're changing that much. But how do you find that your kind of vocal deliveries differ between projects?
it changes. I mean, I'm only doing projects right now if they offer me an opportunity to do something um, creative and interesting with my vocals. Right? If I'm
Hmm.
not doing creative and interesting with my vocals, it doesn't make any sense for me to do. And these different projects give me an opportunity to do stuff that the other projects don't give me an opportunity to do. So at the end of it, I managed to do a little crooning. I managed to do. The issue is, I don't think it's kind of like the Gnostics. Like, yeah, we could tell you this stuff. We could write this stuff down and maybe you'd get 20%, but we would rather tell you and have you get 100%. I mean, if I were to do all the vocal things that I wanted to do, second record out or third record out, my experience has actually been nobody's ready for it. And they will actively and aggressively refuse to understand what it is you're trying to do. Whereas, if you nurse it along from record to record, I can actually gradually, incrementally do different things with my voice before people even realize what's happened. so,
Yeah.
so if you want to hear ideally where I'd want my voice to end up, all you have to do is listen to the most recent things, because it was planned for it to be where it is. I mean, in this way, Mangene is an outlier because, and it sounds so wonderfully foreign to me because of where in my life the vocal performances actually came. So it's everything I just said applies to everything else I've done, but it doesn't apply to Mangene.
Well, of course, it does in some way because I mean, one of the ideas or one of the main ideas I'd say in starting this project was putting your voice into a different context and show some aspects of what this voice particularly can do musically, um, even not even with words in some ways, but also, I mean, you have these both aspects. You have the voice being an instrument, an instrumental thing that plays with other instruments, and then as well, there's some content because of the lyrics. So that was one of the ideas behind this band, and the idea to start it also was a premise for the whole thing in a way.
Do the different projects kind of alter your writing in any way? Like, is there anything that you're for both of you? I mean, like when it comes to the music you're creating, but also the lyrics you're writing, do you find this project you're bringing something different to it that you felt couldn't fit other projects, or?
This was for me heavily affected by, I got a fellowship in Marseille, and I didn't want to, I'm going to sit in France for a month and do what? And they said, well, we'll pay for you to get there and we'll put you up when you're there. And I'm like, yeah, but they said, well, John Cage did it. And I go, okay, I'll do it. Oh, I folded very easily when I heard that John Cage. But I said, well, what did John Cage do? Well, he wrote us a symphony, 30 Days Symphony. And I said, okay, well, that's a good idea. I should do something that nobody else will ever pay me to do. So I wrote a play called The Inimitable Sounds of Love, a threesome in 4 acts, and finished it 30 days, delivered it. It was published in English and in French. But at the time, I'd never written a play before. So I started reading a lot of Harold Pinter, and I really liked the economy of the language. And I think that this aggressively affected, timing wise, I'm not sure whether it happened before, during, or after, but it aggressively affected kind of what I was interested in doing lyrically, right? Where, if you read, you read The Birthday Party or The Pumpkin Eaters or any of the Harold Pinter's screenplay, like the Servant, which is a big favorite of mine, the film, it's super elliptical. It's a lot of what's said between the spaces. And so that's kind of what I tried to, versus the kind of pure diary take that's typically been my specialty. I wanted to do that a little bit differently, and it's made Mangene in actual learning the songs. It's made like Manuel came to me and said, what's that lyric that you? It's made it very difficult because it doesn't naturally flow. It's not an organic narrative for me. So in that way, it's great to do, but it makes it very hard to play live, at least for me.
Sure. And for yourself, Manuel, do you find that you're bringing stuff to this project that you find is unique or different from, I guess, what you typically do, quote unquote?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I told you before that I kind of started with electronic instruments, but I've mostly been playing in these kind of post-punk bands, writing traditional songs. So I'm much of a songwriter, even though you may not have heard a lot of those songs. So this was a different approach, which mostly started with kind of beats and then working around those and slowly develop these kind of tracks. Um, yeah, and of course, since I'm not a classically educated musician, if you want, it's also a way for me to learn about instruments, about sounds, about music at all. Even when I started playing guitar, I was always writing songs, and I kind of learned to play them because I had written them, so I had to play them. And
Sure.
that's kind of similar, but with a totally different approach because I didn't intend to write songs at the beginning. I realized that in some way it became songs, but it's not songs like you would expect it with a verse and chorus and a nice melody and stuff like that. That's not what's happening there.
No, it's very abstract. I found yeah. I was actually going to ask about that. I mean, how free flowing is the kind of music, and how structured and disciplined is it? Because to me, as I was listening to it, I mean, it really did seem very as you mentioned, the songs are about 8 minutes long each, in that kind of avenue, and there is just like. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it goes throat rock, let's say. It doesn't go to that extent necessarily, but I was wondering from your perspective, I mean, like, how structured do you find the songs on this EP that's coming out?
Yeah, they're very structured. If you look at how I did it, I mean, it's really it depends on what you mean by structured. I mean, if you look at it as a plan, as a composition,
Yeah.
um, it's in parts. It's I mean, each track has an idea behind of how this track could be, but then it was layered, so it was put layer on layer. If you look at it as a composition, that's probably a similar thing that you do. You want to achieve you have an idea of the whole thing, and then you build it up. And of course, since in the end, although it started kind of computerless, how I started making them, but then it was composed on a computer screen with a modern DAW, and it was very intentional how these layers are put together, of course. So there's a lot of structure behind, also about how how the rhythms evolve and stuff like that.
Were the four songs composed with the idea of it being one piece, or were they four individual songs that kind of just came together?
Um, they're both in a way. I mean, there's a kind of concept of how they're made and how they deal with sounds. But apart from that, which is a common theme for the whole album, each track has been really on its own then inside this idea.
Yeah, so did the concept of Omicron in atomic terms and what they mean, was that something that was I guess sort of pre-planned or preconceived, or was that when you listen back to what you had, that was the theme you found kind of running through, or how serious, I guess, do you take the title? I mean, how you know.
Well, it's one of those things like, it's a standard feature of a Grimm's fairy tale that the hero meets a witch, and the witch will give you a piece of string, a hunk of cheese, and an eye patch. You have no idea what these things are useful for, but well, whatever. She said, take them, you take them, and in the course of the story, they end up being extremely valuable. I mean, for me, I've been holding on to that title since 1979.
Okay.
I've done like bits and pieces of it have worked. I published a magazine called The Birth of Tragedy, had worked its way into The Birth of Tragedy, and and it comes from a larger book. That's exactly that. You know, it's a glossary for nuclear engineers, which I probably, I don't know how it is that it came to my hands in 1979, but it took on a special resonance for me because by 1985 or 86, I was working in the defense industry. So, which justified me keeping it for 6 years. And even beyond that, I kept it for like 10, 15 more years before the right project came. And, and as soon as I heard the music, like there was no possibility of it being called anything else in my head. You know, it was like that this is precisely what the gypsy had wanted me to do. That's why I'd been given the title, you know. And it gives me a great amount of pleasure to to actually have used it finally. I mean, keep in mind, if it was a thing itself, you know, somebody might call me a hoarder, one of these people who can't get rid of their shit because they're think somehow it's going to be magically valuable. But since this is only takes up space in my head, it's not that big of a deal. So it's and then of course using that title and speaking about it and writing about it, like I published it a few times in the magazine in different contexts, it has caused weird things to happen. Like you know, some guy, Quincy Gunderson, his father was an early whistleblower down at the nuclear test in Nevada. I mean, it's, you know, because he heard me use it and he was like, "Hey, you know, by the way," so it's actually resonated over the decades in a pretty significant way. So I'm glad to finally get it out of my head and put it to some decent use.
There's a question I want to ask just based on kind of what you're talking about there, Eugene, which is just you know, we were talking about kind of like I guess earlier we were sort of talking about oversaturation of art, I guess, and just in general, I mean, for your own kind of like what you choose to read, what you choose to listen to, I mean, you know, we're so inundated with options, especially if you go to like a secondhand store, you can just find so many interesting, weird little trinkets. I was wondering, like, how do you kind of choose what you're going to spend your time with, I guess, in terms of like books, in terms of music, or any other form of art, what you're going to spend time reading or listening to, because, you know, you never know, I guess, the influence it's going to have in your own art. And I mean, obviously, you're, you know, very multimedia disciplinarian. That's a word. It's not. But you have, you know, you have a lot going on. So how do you kind of decide what you're gonna do?
Oh, I'm a slut that way. I'm very easy. Somebody, you know what? You should really read, and I go, okay, and I'll get the book, and you know, I've discovered in the last year at least, I've discovered a lot of stuff that way. You know, I've got, and then I also have some people who I routinely touch bases with because I know they're really good for it. And number one is Biba Koff from Wire. And he and I have been friendly for years. And I go, give me a reading list. He'll give me 10 books on it. I have The Field of Life and Death and Tales of Hulan River by Zhao. I've got the Dirty Havana Trilogy by Pedro Juan Gutierrez, you know, mostly for reading. Music, I'm even more promiscuous. You know, with Shazam, it's quite easy. So I'm
Yeah.
listening to the ping pong. This guy, I'm just this guy, some Sean Davis ping pong club. Terrible name, but the record itself is actually great, you know. It's just something that catches your ear, something that catches your eye, and maybe a steady, you know, a steady counsel of people whose taste you trust, who tell you to. I mean, Manuel was the first one to tell me about Aphex Twin, and it took many years to break me down before I started to find some merit in that choice. But you know, he has an indicator that I find useful in almost every situation. Is it interesting or is it not interesting? And that's it. That's, you know,
Yeah.
that's it. I mean, it's like say Taylor Swift. I don't want to take any shots at Taylor Swift. I'm sure what she's doing is quite relevant to the people who like it. But I, as individually, don't find it to be that interesting. What I find to be interesting about Taylor Swift is that seats on the floor at her shows go for $15,000, and people are paying that. Now, yeah, I don't know what kind of show I'd have to see before I think it was worth $15,000, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
So I find her interesting from that perspective. Like, I wonder if you pay $15,000 for a seat to Taylor Swift, the next day, do you feel like you got your money's worth? I wonder.
It's a good question. I wouldn't know from firsthand experience.
Yeah, me neither. No, I have that kind of around. I'm going to use it on other things.
How much is kind of premeditated? I mean, in terms of um, you were talking about like kind of like how you kind of come about some of the stuff, but do you also like to go on whims and just try interesting shit just sometimes? Just if you find something, you kind of go, okay, I'll give that a shot. Because I find like obviously for someone like yourself who's also in the literary world, I mean, you get influences from kind of just weird conversations, weird observations. I just find myself just picking random books. Just I've like just I'm a book hoarder just because I'm like, yeah,
Yeah,
probably that could be useful someday.
yeah. Now, I have a friend who's a book hoarder, but he's done me one better. He hoards books that have been autographed.
Oh.
And I that was that big of a deal, but there's an entire marketplace. And what's even stranger is that he does it for the joy of collecting and not to sell. So he's got, and he, on occasion, he has sold one. Like, I think he sold a book written by Alexander Haig, that Alexander Haig, uh, former Secretary of Defense in the U.S., had signed. And somehow Sissy Spacek, the actress, wanted it, and he really wanted to meet her. So he said, okay, so he could meet Sissy Spacek, and he sold it to her for some ungodly amount of money. I mean, these are things. I bought books because I thought the covers were interesting. That's how I discovered your Lord Dunsany, if that's how I'm pronouncing his name correctly. The fantasy writer. But I
Mhm.
mean, when I was 9. But I've continued. I discovered Harry Crews that way, and that was when I was 15. So that's a reliable method. Yielding to the algorithm for me, not nearly as useful. Um,
Yeah. No, I agree. I think actually one thing I'd love to pick your brain about a little bit is that I think the weird thing is like a lot of writers now don't actually read. You kind of see it in their prose a little bit where I don't know, there doesn't really seem to be I guess a sense of competition that you get with other writers where sometimes like you read like really good books and you're like, Jesus Christ, I could never be on that level. So I don't know. I think do you think that is always going to persist? I mean, in terms of people reading, or do you think literacy is sort of dying out?
I don't know, man. I have a friend, and she's written a bunch of books. She's got maybe 5 or 6 books out, and she doesn't read.
Hmm.
She doesn't read because she's got like some version of ADD, and she can't. She's probably over 100 books, read about 50 pages of 100 books.
Yeah.
And then she craps out, can't continue, it goes on, and it affects her writing. And of course, I can never tell her that. It's not my position to tell her that. But my methodology is very simple. If I'm writing nonfiction, I will only read fiction. If I'm writing fiction, I will only read nonfiction. That is a way I can keep it from affecting stylistically me, because you just start to unconsciously, subconsciously, maybe consciously even, you start to mimic that which you read. But that's the way I keep from getting confused, and it seems to work pretty well for me. I mean, right now mostly I'm writing nonfiction, so I've got a lot of novels here, like the Dirty Havana trilogy, which so far is great. A little Henry Miller-esque, but the fact that it comes from someplace other than Henry Miller is kind of interesting. So
Yeah, I think one other thing that's kind of interesting. I was trying to take up too much of your time. I know you guys are very busy, but we were kind of talking about kind of the geography of this project and how it's kind of spanning two continents, spanning two countries. And I was wondering, like, do you find from the touring you've done for like decades now, that geography in any way influences your work, speaking new different people, speaking, getting people's different perspectives on things. I mean, because even in the United States alone, as a microcosm, I mean, it's so vast, and there's so many different pockets. Do you find that has influenced any of your projects?
well, we're getting dangerously close to monoculture.
Yeah.
Uh, I've toured long enough to remember where scenes had distinctive feels and looks, and that's not nearly. I could kidnap somebody from Dublin and drop them in Los Angeles, and nobody would know they were from Dublin until they opened their mouth, right?
Yeah.
So it means how they move, how they dress, the things they do are not readable as being not from here, right? And of course, they open your mouth, and then people go, "Oh, what a great accent! Where are you from?" That kind of thing. But so, and I don't think that this is necessarily a narrowing down focus. This monocultural thing. I just think media has made it possible for cool things to go further faster. And in that sense, it's flattened things, but it's also given license to people in other places who maybe ordinarily it would take a trip to New York for them to wake up.
Sure.
I mean, Matthew Barney is not from a major metropolis, right? He's like from Montana or Wyoming or some such thing. So, and he seems to be a fairly creative guy. Though he wouldn't have me on his last record. He asked me if I could sing like R. Kelly. Of course, I'm a famous, I say yes to everything. Can you sing like R. Kelly? Yes. Can you send me a tape of you sing like R. Kelly? Sure. I said, I sent back singing an Isley Brothers tune to Matthew Barney, and I never heard from him again. so there is that. But yeah, I think generally it's I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a real weird mix. Far and wide and deep, and whether there's any value to it at all. I don't know.
yeah, I'm sure there is. I mean, but maybe the geography thing is less than kind of people you're surrounded with. I mean, there's many like parallel kind of cultures existing, and I mean, these are more, I believe, than there have been like parallel cultures at the same time existing. And geography, if you look at the music industry or the musicians here in Berlin or in Switzerland, there's still a big difference once you start talking to them of the expectations they have, like what Eugene has, simply because culture funding is a big thing in many European countries, and it's not in the US. I mean, state funding. So there's a completely different approach, and this, of course, has an influence also on the music that's made. I think so. That's certainly a point. But then again, I mean, even it's kind of still surprising to me that I'm making music with Eugene, and even more that we have a kind of understanding when we talk together, because he's coming from a totally different culture than I am. But still, there's a very big understanding, I believe.
Yeah.
Versus I can meet somebody walking out of the house, and that's going to be a totally different world.
No,
What's funny, every now and then it kind of makes itself known. Like for the Buñuel's record, not the new one, Mansitude, but the one right before, Killers Like Us. They said, "Do what you always do. Give us a title, give us songs, lyrics, and some artwork for the record." And so I said, "Great. Here are the lyrics. Here are the songs, and here's a photo for the cover." And it was a Model 29 Smith and Wesson 44 Magnum on a table with bullets around it. And the Italian guys in Buell were like, "Whoa, what the fuck is this? I don't want, what kind of American thing you got?" And I go, no. First of all, the record is called Killers Like Us. Second of all, it's a perfect end to a trilogy, a noir trilogy. That's my gun. That's my kitchen tables and my bullets. My wife took the photograph. So I think it's completely defensible, aesthetically speaking. And then they were like, "Oh, okay." Right. But it was a complete culture clash just in that, I mean, they did not feel comfortable with that as a cover. And to me, it never even dawned on me that somebody would not feel comfortable with that as a cover. So,
well, actually, playing with Manuel, I mean, obviously, if I'm correct, I think Switzerland has the highest gun ownership in Europe, so perhaps he wouldn't be as freaked out by that.
it's not like, you can go to a grocery store packing a gun with, they're not into that. So,
Not this, but of course you can walk into any house and there will be a gun.
No, I do have to admit, my little European mind can't comprehend that shotguns are sold in Walmart. I think that is just the biggest cultural difference.
Eh, well, you know what? I used to have a federal firearms license. I was licensed to sell guns, and I sold guns to my grandmother. So I think I'm super happy. I think everybody should be armed, but whatever. That's another discussion for another time. It makes me sound like a right-wing lunatic, which I'm not at all. But specifically now in America, it seems to be a prescriptive for a much longer life.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I think didn't Marx say proletariat should be armed anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason for this, but that's a really big other discussion. I mean, for me, I wouldn't be so surprised about this cover, because I kind of know what Eugene is doing and thinking. Um, so, I mean, the gun is just an extension of your kind of muscles in a way, if you want. And of course, your muscles are limited. We started this discussion with that. I mean, if you're invited by a guy to fight, he might be totally wrong because there's some extensions to what you fight man to man. And that's to me an interesting subject, although I refused to shoot when I was in the Swiss Army and they kicked me out. And, so I'm totally the contrary, but you see the point that I kind of understand the concept that's behind of Eugene's thinking.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. And that like we're talking about kind of the monoculture, but I even find like, within European context, like just the differences between us on this weird little island and like the mainland, like in Switzerland, for example, with conscription, things like that. I don't know. I find that like really interesting. I think to some degree is the kind of the internet age has democratized this as it had promised to do, but I feel like people feel a little pissed off with what you're seeing. But my perception is that, well, all democracies are full of bigots and assholes. So to me, it's
Yeah.
not really surprising that you're seeing I don't know, like with Twitter and the neo-Nazis on that and all these kind of things.
Right.
Like it's not really shocking to me perhaps, but I don't know.
Well,
I
but
think
I mean, you just said it right there. Seeing neo Nazis on the internet. I mean, if you're old enough, I remember when neo Nazis were actually chasing people down alleys. So
yeah.
seeing them on the internet, it's like fine, let them stay on on the internet. People are not getting their heads kicked in parking garages anymore. So, not that this ever happened to me, but it was in the 80s. This was certainly definitely an issue. And it frittered out like all of these other strength worshiping cultures do, because there's no end game. I mean, even Nazi Germany imagined that there was an end game, but there really wasn't an end game. But stable societies don't kill their own people. That's pretty much the rule of the game. So they have their brief moments in time and then they're gone. So right now it's guys in their underwear with swastika flags on their bedroom walls, who talk slick and try to hurt people's feelings via trolling. I could not rap about these guys at all. So I don't perceive them. And when I say I don't give a crap, what I'm saying is I do not perceive them to be dangerous.
Well, one thing I want to ask, just for a wrap up, is I was reading an interview with you, Eugene, I think from about a year ago, perhaps, and at that time you were talking about leaving the US. I think you were planning on moving to Spain, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Just in general, I mean, like, yeah, obviously you're still in the US at the moment. What kind of like makes you stick it out, or is it just like the logistics of things, or is there actually, I guess, a purpose to staying there?
No, there's zero purpose to stay here, but you time. And today I am actually finally the paperwork was finished. I am the proud owner of a house in Spain. This
Yes.
morning email, so it is now mine. And now I got furniture that needs to be put in and stuff. And then I want the kid to finish out the school year. But my I still have family in New York because I'm a New Yorker. But New York is closer to Spain than it is to California. And I've got one of my kids is in New York. Two are in California, but they travel easily and travel well. So, I mean, outside of my family, I can't think of anything that I'm gonna, what am I leaving behind? Yeah, I know.
Fair
I
enough.
tell you, a constant and continual fear of violent death at the hands of a gun wielding assailant. That's what I'm leaving behind. And I spent enough time in Spain to know, you can get shot anywhere in the world, but it's not pervasive. Like if you cut somebody off in traffic, they're not going to follow you to the gas station and shoot you there. It's not going to happen, right? But it happens here every weekend. So, and I live in a low income neighborhood where there used to be like running gun battles in front of the house. Oh, I don't want my 4-year-old daughter to learn to be taking cover behind cars before she can read, which is certainly shaping up to be the case right now. So I'm looking forward to getting out. Of course, because I'm a disgusting American, I'm still trying to figure out how I can get all of the copious numbers of guns I have into Europe. But that's not a discussion for public consumption, I guess. So, of course, everybody from Europe who I say that to, they go, "You just leave them," and I go, "Nah, Al, that's easy for you to say.
Well, as a Swiss, I would say, of course, there are ways to keep them.
Yes.
So maybe you're going
But
to
then
the right
again,
country.
as a Swiss or as somebody living in Berlin, I'd say that maybe the difference, going back to globalization, the difference between going from America to Spain is maybe less than what you actually do is going from a not so good neighborhood into a better neighborhood, which is maybe more the case. I don't know about Spain, but if I look around Berlin, we got similar problems increasing, like what you described from the US. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think unfortunately the rise of not great politics is kind of becoming a pan-European issue, including here. I can't be sanctimonious about that. We
Oh,
talk.
we know about your country there, friend. We know.
Hey, hey man.
What do they call it? Stab City? Was that Limerick?
Oh, Stab City Limerick. Yeah, actually, I think I think that's a bit of an overestimation. I like Limerick. I think it's a nice place. I didn't get stabbed when I was there, so I thank them for that.
No,
Yeah, I
no,
have
no.
very good memory of Limerick. I mean, there have
Yeah,
been great people there, and
yeah.
you had a great time. But yeah,
But they were also the ones who told us it was called Stab City. So
It does have that name. Yeah, it's not in any government building, but it is kind of.
no, we've had great times in Ireland, man. Where was it? Dublin, Limerick,
Cork.
Cork. Yeah. So these were great times. Yeah, really appreciative audiences. So
Yeah. Do you think it will have a knock-on effect, Brexit, even though we're still in the European Union, kind of for touring acts?
I think it'll probably increase the numbers of people that you get.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
if it's still easy to play Ireland, I'm game to get back to Wayland. And game to even get over to Straight Blast Gym, train with those guys.
Well, on that note, thanks very much for your time, guys. I'm sorry for screwing everything up. I guess the final thing I'll just ask is there anything you guys would like to add before we wrap up or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say buy my memoir.
Oh, what's it called?
Oh man, it's called. Here, I'll show you right now because I got a copy right here. It's called "A Walk Across Dirty Water and Straight into Murderer's Row." It's on Feral House Press. There you go. I don't know if you can
Perfect.
see.
I can see it perfectly.
Buy it. Buy it.
Yeah, and I support that. It's a great book. It's a great read. It's fun. It's informal. You should read it, and of course, you should buy our record, and you should buy it in vinyl because it sounds great. It looks great. I think
Yeah.
it's fantastic. You should
Yes.
go order it, buy it.
Yeah.
Actually, sorry, just on that note, just one last thing, one final thing. You were kind of talking earlier about how kind of people don't really listen to records anymore. Yeah, I'm seeing kind of some of a resurgence of vinyl seemingly internationally. Do you think people are buying them and listening to them like as a complete whole, or do you think it's just more for some kind of physical collection or some kind of like I don't know, some kind of permanence, I guess, to the music?
I think people who, if you have some means to play vinyl, you will play vinyl. But for example, I got 3 turntables here. None of them are plugged in, so that I'm clearly at this point collecting for artifacts. But also, I'm packing up my stuff to move. So when we get to the new house, I fully want to take out one of the turntables because that's just like listening to vinyl. So But right now, no. So I've got records here in it's a shrink wrap that I haven't opened, but I fully intend to as soon as I have a spread, which is not where I'm in right now. I'm in a cramped office room in my house.
I see. I mean, I see both. There's people who are actually listening to records. If I look at my 20-year-old kid, he started listening to records and then enjoys to listen to it side by side, one side and the other side. But I know many people who buy records and it's more like a piece of art which they want to have, but then they will listen on Spotify anyway.
Yeah.
So it's both worlds exist, I believe.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate your time, and thanks for talking to me.
All right. Ready.
Bye.
All right. Later. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to that episode of Post-Burnout.com interviews. We're an independent venture run by yours truly, and as I said at the beginning, liking, rating, subscribing, and sharing really helps us out a lot. If you're feeling extra generous, we do have a PayPal donation link in the episode description, but don't feel obligated, of course. We've also begun releasing occasional exclusive episodes on Spotify, so subscribe there if you'd be interested in hearing those. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.